All right, so let's dive into something pretty cool that's changing a lot of fields like genetics and marketing, Bayesian data analysis.
Oh, yeah.
You might be thinking, why should I care about this? Yeah, I mean, organizational sciences.
Hmm.
Well, here's the thing. This approach is like practically unheard of in your world.
Yeah, it's a real blind spot.
And it's a missed opportunity when you think about how we interpret data and make decisions.
Absolutely.
We've got these excerpts from a research article.
Okay.
It's called The Time Has Come, Bayesian Methods for Data Analysis in the Organizational Sciences. We're going to unpack that today.
It's good.
The authors, John Kurski, Herman Guinness, like the beer,
Yeah.
and Harry Joe.
Yeah.
They make a really compelling case for using this approach, especially compared to the way most of us were taught to analyze data.
They really do. You know that traditional null hypothesis significance testing, or NHST, we all learned?
Yeah.
It's got some serious limitations.
Yeah, the one where we try to reject the null hypothesis.
Right.
Can you remind me, what's the core problem with that approach again?
The problem is that it focuses on the probability of seeing our data if the null hypothesis is true.
Okay.
But that's not what we actually want to know, is it?
No.
We want to know the probability of that null hypothesis actually being true given the data we have.
Right.
It's kind of like trying to judge someone's guilt by looking at how often innocent people act suspicious
Okay.
instead of actually directly looking at the evidence.
Oh, so it's kind of backwards.
Yeah.
Instead of focusing on the evidence at hand, it's focusing on what could happen in a hypothetical world where nothing's going on.
Exactly. Bayesian analysis kind of flips the script.
Okay.
It gives you a much more intuitive and insightful way to actually evaluate the evidence, and it all starts with using what we already know.
That makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like a detective, starting an investigation.
Right.
But they don't just walk into a crime scene blind.
Right.
They use their experience and knowledge from past cases to guide their thinking.
Precisely.
Right.
So you start with an informed prior understanding. Not just like a wild guess,
Right.
but something that's grounded in previous research or knowledge.
Okay.
And then like a detective gathering clues.
Uh,
You update that understanding with each new piece of data you collect.
so you're not throwing away valuable information.
You got it. And the article uses a simple example of a coin flip to illustrate how powerful this can be.
Okay. I'm always up for a simple example.
All right, so imagine you've got a coin and you flip it once
Okay.
and it lands on heads.
Okay.
Now, if you don't know anything about this coin beforehand, you can't really conclude much from that, right?
One flip doesn't tell you a lot.
It could be a fair coin, or it could be biased towards heads, who knows?
Right.
But imagine you knew this coin came from a magic shop that sells trick coins
Okay.
that are guaranteed to be extremely biased towards either heads or tails.
Interesting.
So suddenly that single flip landing on heads...
Becomes way more meaningful.
Exactly. You'd be pretty sure you've got the heads biased coin.
Right. Right.
So it's the same data, but your interpretation changes dramatically based on what you already knew.
Mm-hmm.
That's the core idea behind Bayesian analysis, incorporating prior information to refine your understanding as you gather new evidence.
So it's not just about blindly crunching numbers.
Right.
It's about using context and prior knowledge to make sense of them.
Exactly. It's a much more holistic way of looking at data. And you know what's even more interesting?
Tell me.
The authors show how this works in a real-world scenario using multiple linear regression to predict job performance.
Now, that's something every organization cares about. I'm all ears.
They use job performance as the outcome, and the predictors being general mental ability, conscientiousness, and what's known as biodata.
Okay, biodata for those of us not in HR. What is that exactly?
Good point. It's essentially information gathered from a biographical inventory, things like someone's work history, education, maybe even hobbies and interests.
Okay.
The idea is to get a more comprehensive picture of the candidate than just a resume.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, so they're trying to see how these three factors relate to job performance.
Yep.
How does Bayesian analysis come into play here?
So here's where it gets really cool with Bayesian analysis. You don't just get a single best guess for how these variables relate to each other.
Okay.
You get a full range of possibilities, a distribution of credible values for each element in the model.
So instead of just a point on a map, it's more like a heat map showing you the most likely areas.
Yeah, you can visualize it as a distribution,
Okay.
seeing not just the most likely value, but also the uncertainty around it.
Uh-huh.
And the authors, they represent this uncertainty with something called a highest density interval, or HDI.
Okay.
Think of the HDI like a heat map, showing you the most likely values for each factor, with the hottest areas being the most credible ones.
All right, so we're getting a visual sense of the range of possibilities, not just a single point estimate.
Exactly. It acknowledges that we're dealing with probabilities and degrees of belief, not absolute certainty.
It seems much more realistic.
Right, and you can even compare the strengths of different predictors side by side.
Okay.
For example, in the article, it looks like general mental ability might actually be a better predictor of job performance than conscientiousness in some situations.
That's interesting. It's not just about whether a factor is significant or not, but about understanding the relative importance of each factor.
Right.
I can see how that would be valuable for making personnel decisions.
Absolutely. And remember that good old R squared,
Yeah.
which tells us how well the model as a whole explains the data.
Yeah, the measure of how well everything fits together.
Well, in Bayesian analysis, you don't just get one R squared value, you get an entire distribution for it.
Oh, wow.
It's that emphasis on ranges and possibilities again.
Starting to see a pattern here.
Yeah.
Less pinpoint accuracy, more like a flashlight beam,
Yeah.
revealing a range of possibilities.
A great analogy. And, this focus on distributions really highlights one of the biggest advantages of Bayesian analysis.
What's that?
It can actually accept a null hypothesis.
Wait, really? But I thought the whole point of hypothesis testing was to reject the null hypothesis.
That's the traditional approach.
Okay.
But with Bayesian analysis, if the data suggests there's truly no effect, you can actually accept the null hypothesis.
Oh, that's interesting.
This is crucial for making sound decisions.
Yeah.
You don't want to waste time and resources chasing after things that aren't really there.
That's a powerful point. I
Yeah.
can see how that would be incredibly useful in organizational settings.
Absolutely. And it's not just about accepting the null. Bayesian analysis handles complex models and messy data far better than traditional methods.
Okay.
Outliers,
Hmm.
different data structures, things that can really trip up those traditional approaches.
Right.
Bayesian analysis handles them gracefully.
So it's more adaptable to the realities of real-world data.
Exactly.
That makes a lot of sense. What else stands out?
Perhaps most importantly, it's incredibly robust. Remember how we were talking about the traditional p-value being influenced by things like how the researcher planned to collect data or how many comparisons they made?
Yeah, how even thinking about collecting data differently can change the results. It felt like a house of cards.
Exactly. Bayesian analysis kind of sidesteps all of that. It focuses solely on the data you actually have without being swayed by those hypothetical what-ifs.
Okay.
This makes it much more objective and less susceptible to researcher bias.
That feels much more reliable and trustworthy. It's like you're getting a clearer, more accurate view of what the data is really telling you.
That's a great way to put it. Bayesian analysis is all about getting to the heart of the evidence, cutting through the noise, and providing a more honest and nuanced understanding of the data.
Okay, this has been incredibly insightful, but let's bring it back to our listeners for a moment.
Sure.
We've been talking about Bayesian analysis in this theoretical sense,
Uh-huh.
but what about the practical side of things?
Right.
The article briefly mentioned software for actually doing this kind of analysis.
Yeah.
What's out there, and is it user-friendly? For someone who's not a coding expert.
Great question. The authors specifically mention a program called JGS, just another Gibbs sampler.
Gibbs sampling, that sounds a bit intimidating.
It does sound complex.
Yeah.
But the good news is JGS is free and open source.
Okay.
And there are packages and interfaces like R and RJAGs that make it much more user-friendly.
Man.
You don't need to be a programming wizard to work with it.
So there's a bit of a learning curve,
Yeah.
but it's manageable for those of us who aren't professional programmers.
Absolutely. And there are tons of resources to help you along the way, tutorials, online communities, even textbooks like the one the authors of this article wrote on Bayesian data analysis.
Right.
It's like learning a new language.
Yeah.
It might feel daunting at first, but with practice and the right support, you can become fluent.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
And I imagine the insights you gain would be worth the effort. Okay, so we've explored the power and the potential of Bayesian analysis. But every tool has limitations, right?
Of course.
What are some of the potential pitfalls or challenges do we need to be aware of?
That's a really important question.
Yeah.
Like any statistical method, Bayesian analysis can be misused or misapplied.
Okay.
One thing to be really cautious about is the quality of your prior information.
Right.
If you're starting with flawed or biased information, it can really skew your results.
So garbage in, garbage out, as they say.
Exactly. It's crucial to carefully consider the source and validity of your prior information.
Makes sense. What other challenges are there?
Another thing to consider is the computational complexity Bayesian analysis can become computationally intensive, especially with massive data sets or very intricate models.
Right.
You might need powerful computers or specialized software to run those analyses.
So it's not always a quick and easy solution?
Not always.
Yeah.
But remember, even with simpler models and data sets, the insights you gain from Bayesian analysis can be invaluable. And as computing power keeps advancing, those limitations become less and less of an issue. And as computing power keeps advancing, those limitations become less and less of an issue.
Right, the trade-off. Sometimes you need to put in a bit more effort up front, to
Yeah.
unlock those deeper insights.
Yeah.
But I think that's a key takeaway here. Bayesian analysis isn't just about plugging numbers into a formula.
Absolutely. It's a different way of thinking about data altogether,
Huh.
one that emphasizes incorporating what we already know,
Right.
acknowledging uncertainty,
Right.
and focusing on the data itself rather than hypothetical scenarios.
It's a more nuanced and insightful approach.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I think that's what makes it so powerful. It's not like a magic bullet or anything,
Right.
but it's a tool that can help us make better decisions based on a deeper understanding of the evidence.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I have to say, this deep dive has been really eye-opening. It's given me a whole new perspective on data analysis and the importance of moving beyond those traditional methods.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is a field that's constantly evolving
Yeah.
with new applications and developments emerging all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So stay curious and keep exploring.
So for our listener out there who's maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this new information, what's the one thing they should take away from our conversation today?
I think the biggest takeaway is if you're looking for a more robust, honest, and insightful way to analyze data Bayesian methods are definitely worth exploring.
Yeah.
They offer a way to incorporate what you already know, acknowledge uncertainty, and focus on the evidence at hand,
Uh-huh.
which can lead to more reliable and nuanced conclusions.
It's a powerful shift in thinking that can fundamentally change how you approach data analysis.
It really can.
And the question is, now that you know about this powerful tool, how will you use it?
And as computing power keeps advancing, those limitations become less and less of an issue.
Right? It's a trade-off. Sometimes you need to put in a bit more effort up front to unlock those deeper insights. But
Right.
I think that's a key takeaway here. Bayesian analysis isn't just about plugging numbers into a formula.
Absolutely. It's a different way of thinking about data altogether,
Uh-huh.
one that emphasizes incorporating what we already know,
Okay.
acknowledging uncertainty and focusing on the data itself rather than hypothetical scenarios.
It's a more nuanced and insightful approach.
Yeah,
And ultimately, I think that's what makes it so powerful.
absolutely.
It's not like a magic bullet or anything.
Right.
But it's a tool that can help us make better decisions based on a deeper understanding of the evidence.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
Well, I have to say this deep dive has been really eye-opening.
Good.
It's given me a whole new perspective on data analysis and the importance of moving beyond those traditional methods.
I'm glad to hear that. And remember, this is a field that's constantly evolving
Yeah.
with new applications and developments emerging all the time.
Uh-huh.
So stay curious and keep exploring.
So for our listener out there who's maybe feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this new information, what's the one thing they should take away from our conversation today?
I think the biggest takeaway is if you're looking for a more robust, honest, and insightful way to analyze data Bayesian methods are definitely worth exploring.
Okay.
They offer a way to incorporate what you already know, acknowledge uncertainty, and focus on the evidence at hand, which can lead to more reliable and nuanced conclusions.
It's a powerful shift in thinking that can fundamentally change how you approach data analysis.
It really can.
And the question is, now that you know about this powerful tool, how will you use it?